On behalf of Art at America Society, we are delighted to welcome you tonight to our exhibition walkthrough on Fanny Sanín geometric equations. We are honored to be joined by Dr. Edward Sullivan, the Helen Gold Shepard Professor in the History of Art at the Institute of Fine Arts at NYU. Dr. Sullivan is a leading scholar and curator in the field of modern and contemporary Latin American and Caribbean art, and the curator of this exhibition. We are also delighted to welcome Dr. Megan Kincaid, art historian, curator, and faculty member in the Humanities and Social Sciences at the Cooper Union. Dr. Kincaid is also an alumna of the Institute of Fine Arts at NYU, where she co-organized Fanny Sanín, New York, The Critical Decade, 1971-1981. The first comprehensive solo exhibition examining the artist's evolving practice of geometric abstraction during her first decade living in New York City. This presentation and these programs related to Fanny Sanín geometric equations are made possible by generous support from Diane and Bruce Halley Foundation, Terra Foundation for American Art, Wyeth Foundation for American Art, Jacques and Natasha Hellman Foundation, New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, New York State Council on the Arts, with the support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature, Erika Roberts, Carla Harwich, Lily Scarpetta, and Anna Sokolov. In-kind support is provided by Sicardi Ayers Basino. We are also like to thank the Arts of the Americas Circle for their ongoing support to our programs. A special thank you to our speakers tonight and to all of you for being here with us. Enjoy. Thank you so much.
Hello, I'm very, very pleased to be here with you all. And I am Edward Sullivan. I'm professor at the Institute of Fine Arts at NYU, and I had the great privilege of being the curator of the show. I just am going to say a few words because I want to speak a little bit about Fanny and how I knew her many years ago, and then we'll have a dialogue. Megan Kincaid, who was one of the most brilliant students at the Institute of Fine Arts and is currently finishing your dissertation, writing a book. You're finished your dissertation. I was on the committee, of course. And it was wonderful, and it was about Mexican art and American art, and now it's becoming a book. So it'll soon appear on the bestseller list of the New York Times. And Megan was someone who had a very important role in promoting Fanny Sanín, because we, in our publicity for the exhibition, say that it is the first institutional show of a larger scale, because it has every well, not every phase of Fanny's work, because when you were a student in Bogota, you were a realist, and you have some work in your studio that is very, very detailed. And you and your sister who was also an artist, a very distinguished artist in Colombia, did very early examples of as one would normally do as a student of figurative art, but you soon moved into the world of abstraction. So we have a show that includes free-form abstraction and then a series of paintings. They're in this second room where Fanny is moving into considering the ramifications of form and moving into structure, and then moves into a much more, I guess we could call it hard edge, although that, I've been thinking about this so much since we've been organizing and then picking work for the show, which is not easy because Fanny is very prolific and her work is in many collections. And we had the great good fortune to have a number of pieces from Fanny's studio, which is very close to here. It's on East 86th Street, and she has been living and working in Manhattan for over 50 years. So she is an American artist. She is a Latin American artist. I guess you could also call her a Latina artist, but she is an artist. That is the most important part. And to be celebrated, and I think that this exhibition is a wonderful celebration of her work, which also includes a selection of some of the very small studies. Fanny is a very, very meticulous artist. She works from small to larger, to larger, to larger, to monumental, according to the piece. And so we also wanted to suggest that working method, and behind or in front of us is a vitrine with some of those studies from the 1970s and the 1980s. And so that's an important thing to take a look at. I was very pleased that our work, it took perhaps two years or so to gather the work together, and we worked with the brilliant staff of the America Society, and there are so many people in this room who were so generous and so perspicacious. They lent their eyes and their opinions, and so everything was a group effort, which is how I like to work. And the installation was done with little tiny pieces of paper put on a mock-up of the galleries, and then we did a SketchUp on the computer. And so it was an iterative process, and we met again and again and again, and went to Fanny's studio, and we worked with a marvelous Colombian artist who was Carlos Mota, old friend, and a great artist who's currently in Spain. But he chose colors. He worked with Fanny about the placement of the vitrine, and so he added another touch of, I guess, of professionalism to this project. And I was really delighted to see, and it was brought to my attention by Meyer Sasson. Meyer Sasson is the other half of the duo of Fanny Sanín and Meyer Sasson. That wonderful alliterative nature of their names links them together, as does their almost 60 years of marriage. So that should be celebrated as well. And Meyer brought to our attention the fact that the New Yorker first published online, and then on Monday published their latest issue, in which you turn to page 3 and it says "Goings on about town," and there is a wonderful image of that painting, the first one I'm pointing to, and then a short but really pithy review of the exhibition, in which the reviewer called it a mesmerizing experience. And that, I think, is such a wonderful term, because I've been mesmerized by Fanny's work since about 1990. And I have always loved it. I first met her when plans were being made for an exhibition that was mounted in Milwaukee, traveled around the US. It went to Miami, it went to Denver, it went to Phoenix, and it was called Latin American Women Artists, 1915 to 1995. And I had the privilege of being one of the advisors. I also wrote a text in which I discussed Fanny's art. And so we've just had this wonderful symbiotic relationship since then. And I won't go into that because we can talk about lots of other things, and Megan and Fanny want to speak. But I just wanted to give this introduction to say that I very, very much wanted to have the possibility of someone, either anyone, myself, it turned out, to curate a show of her work so that we could all see the different phases of the work. And very happily, pardon me, Aimee Iglesias Lucan, who is, she's traveling now, but she is the director of the art division of America's Society, and she was very generous and with her time, as she always is. And she also was very receptive to the idea of a monographic show of Fanny's work. So the stars aligned beautifully. And they aligned so well that during the course of our choosing the work, getting in touch with collectors all over the country, in Latin America, in Europe, and looking at works in Fanny's own collection, some of the works that we wanted were purchased by the Museum of Modern Art. Prior to that, the Los Angeles County Museum had purchased a work. The Tate in London has, what, 9, 12 works that they recently acquired? No?
No, one.
One, but all the studies.
Okay.
Sí. Con los estudios, bueno, son 9 o algo así, ¿no? Bueno, the Guggenheim, the list goes on and on and on. And there are also, what I think is so important, really wonderful works in university and college museums, in the Zimmerli Museum at Rutgers, at the Allen Memorial Art Museum at Oberlin in Ohio, and others, so that students can learn from this work. And I was particularly happy when I myself could promote students learning, and I would like Megan to speak a little bit about, well, anything she wants, but particularly about the experience of working with Fanny, the generosity of Fanny, going to her studio, and as I said, Megan was one of 3 curators, and so she was really more the pioneer than I was.
No.
Yes, you were, because you got this work into an institution, our own institution, Institute of Fine Arts, in 2020. Unfortunately, it opened only a couple of weeks before the pandemic. That was not so great. However, you were able to do public programs, and Fanny was so kind as to leave the work for almost 2 years at the Institute. So we saw so many people were able to go and see a few examples. So let me give this microphone, I'll just stop talking, because I could talk for hours about each work. I'd love it so much. Megan has a lot to say. We have a question or two to ask Fanny in a few minutes. So I'm passing this microphone to you.
Symbolically so.
Yes, the torch.
The torch. Well, thank you, Edward. And as I was saying before, Edward is an immaculate speaker, and the segue at the end from university museums to student work was pitch perfect. And so I knew it was coming, the Passover. I'll start by saying that when I saw this exhibition for the first time, I was blown away and mesmerized, to use that word, and stood in front of several paintings as long as I could before I had to get back to my day job. But also, working on this exhibition in 2020 that Edward mentioned was not just a critical decade in that it covered Fanny's move to New York in 1971, and a shift that we identified as student curators, both when I was at the very start of my PhD program, is alongside 2 students, Anastasia Perfileva and Edward Chang, who were my co-curators. We identified this pivotal moment of transition from what we thought of as Fanny's style when she moved to New York, the vertical linear bands, into the more complex geometric arrangements that are, as Edward would say, kaleidoscopic, I think of as sometimes channeling your attention in upward or downward arrows. And so we wanted to settle on that year of transition and why it might be that New York, a new artistic community, a different sightlines outside of her studio might have impelled that shift. But it was a critical decade for Fanny, but also a critical moment for me as a student. I'd entered the PhD program wanting to study abstract expressionism, male artists in New York, and that's not what I left doing. And I shifted my focus. I ended up writing a dissertation on Mexican artists and specifically focusing on a woman artist in Mexico. And I really think that that experience of curating this exhibition broadened my conceptual horizons and made me realize the kind of work I was interested in and how I wanted to spend my time as a student. But at the same time, it was my first experience working with a living artist. I had just curated a couple of very small things with friends in apartment gallery spaces, which, yes, that counts, and had been a year as a curatorial fellow at MoMA working on a retrospective of Charles White, who is not a living artist. And so this was my first at-bat as a co-curator, and I was extremely nervous about going to an artist's studio. It was my first studio visit as well. And last night I was looking through my notebooks, which I've kept, because why not archive yourself beginning at age 22? I don't know, sure, I just collected everything, but I went back through my notebook. And I had, on November 7th, Edward says we can visit Fanny's studio with an exclamation point. And I remember going to the studio and how generous Fanny was with her time, how much of her process we were able to see for the first time, going through drawers of the studies with Fanny and Mayer and learning that these paintings, which seem to be so perfect, are the product of an extraordinary amount of time and calibration and labor and consideration. And as much as we wanted to ask questions, we were learning by looking so much of that time in the studio. And I remember seeing this painting on that far wall over there, which I believe is 1974, and thinking, well, we couldn't possibly have a show without that painting in it. It blew me away, and I still, when I walked in the space, was so happy to be able to see it again. When I looked at it for the first time, I thought about the ways that the color relationships are so in sync with one another that they almost produce a third zone in the place where two color panels meet each other. And they create this sort of internal dialogue about color and form that really just, you could spend such a long time thinking about it and trying to understand those dialogues between space. And I was so happy to see it again. And that lived in a lecture hall with another painting in a range of blues. And we thought putting them next to each other to explore the color sensitivity that Fanny has honed over decades of work was just a spectacular pairing. That painting isn't here, but that dialogue exists among so many of the other paintings that you see.
I think that actually you just made me think of something that I sort of intuited, but I didn't really formulate it until you just spoke. And that is the painter Hans Hofmann often spoke of his interest in what he called push and pull. The idea that the viewer would look at a work of art and would intuit visually and psychologically the power of colors and shapes to bounce off or to dialogue with one another. And it was only right now that I'm thinking that even though Fanny's work, aside from the gestural abstraction, one of which was in the Venice Biennial, one of the paintings over here at the left, and one of the gestural abstraction paintings was recently shown at an exhibition of women in abstract expressionism at the Whitechapel Gallery in London, just to give you an example of how people are looking now in a new sense at Fanny's work. But this idea of looking at not only the picture that Megan so beautifully described, but so many of them in which we see this dynamism. It's a very strange thing, and it's best done when you are alone in the studio or you're alone here in this or in these galleries, and you can see that these things actually almost come alive, and they have this sense of I don't mean to say architectural, but of builtness. That's a word that I just invented. I don't know if it's a real word, but a sense of something that you see going in and out and pushing and pulling. And when I am in Fanny's studio, it is a very, very interesting experience because the studio faces 87th Street, and from 87th Street to 125th Street, for some reason, and I don't know why, the buildings are all low. And so you look down and you see these, it's almost like looking into a checkerboard pattern or a chessboard or something like that, in which you see holes and you see solids and voids and things that seem to vibrate and syncopate. And I'm not saying that there's a recreation of any architectural place in Fanny's work, but there is something of structure that goes beyond simply the surface. And the surface is interrupted all the time. If you look at it with care, actually, the famous art historian Robert Herbert, who was a professor for many years at Yale, wrote one of the most beautiful lines that I have ever read about an artist, and he wrote it about Barbizon's school landscape painting in the 19th century, which has nothing to do with Fanny's work, really. But the last line of the book that he wrote to accompany an exhibition of this work at Yale Art Gallery said, if you look at an artist's work with love, you can see them, or you can sense them beside you moving their hand. And I think that pertains very much to Fanny's work. And this is an artist who creates these works as labors of love, as labors of desire to bring together lines and colors and shapes and forms that have a personality of their own in each one. Do you want to talk about a little bit about process? And
Fanny's process.
yeah,
Yes, I mean, one of the things I know that you're just quoting on Barbizon landscapes, but I did think about the early works, in particular in the show, the oil paintings, as really evocative and gestural landscapes that put your body in a sense of place as much as your eye. And how many of the works do direct both your eye to look, but also your body to create a sense of place, especially in the larger scale works. So that was just one note. I was thinking, as much as they are non-objective, they do have a sense of, as you said, structure, or even just a sense of placement, a way of comporting your body in front of a work of art, which is really quite remarkable. A thing to achieve as a painter. I think that it's even in a seemingly flat painting that it can be so bodily and experienced. But in the first paintings, the earliest paintings in this show, which I believe are 1964 is the earliest, Edward?
I believe it's 64.
64.
64
La obra.
in this exhibition.
Yeah.
64, the first one. And the one right at its side has this extraordinary passage in green of encrusted oil paint. And as you move along this wall, the compartments in the landscape simplify down into geometric compartments. But then there's another major shift in Fanny's practice, which is that you move from oil paint to acrylic. And that happens, and at the same time, I was wondering, of course, there are material changes in your practice that occur by moving from oil to acrylic. As an artist would tell you, it's almost like working in two different media. And at the same time, it seems that acrylic recommended itself new conceptual methods as well, that it wasn't just about materiality, but that acrylic opened up potentially a new way of thinking for you as well.
Me
You-
explica que no entendí mucho el cambio de...
Ah, cuando cambiaste de óleo a acrílico,
Sí.
fue como una manera de cambiar de vista y además cambiar de materia y cambiar de concepto de cómo concebir, de cómo organizar una pintura.
Well, at that moment, after I live in Mexico, the first one was made in Colombia. I painted there. And then the two that follow are from London. So you can see the difference or visually that I left the texture and I wanted to simplify the shapes or the works, and it was like an evolution more than a change. And what I wanted is to create new forms, but without the texture, less forms. And I was very influenced for the artists in the United States and Europe that were doing the big canvas, and they were working with the flame colors. And this one, I came back to Monterrey, where I used to live, and this one was more influenced by the Far Edge artists at that time.
Hard edge.
Yeah, ratios, Kelly, Nolan, Morris Louis, all those artists that were working with that. And I felt that the oil wasn't, it wasn't very good for me to work in that kind of painting with oil, because oil dries very slow and gives so much brillo, como dices brillo,
Shine.
shine, and left the 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 brush,
Stroke.
huh?
Stroke.
Yeah, the strokes. So I wanted to change, and for that's what I changed to acrylic. That I wanted to give me more how to say,
Flexibility.
flexibility. It dries fast, and also the image, the color is more plain, and so flat. And so I started discovering new color because I apply the color. I take it from the tube, but I mix the color with another. So everything you see a yellow, it's not the yellow directly from the tubes, I just added another color to change a little bit. So my color are a little different because I think I create them from the ones on the tube. So the structure also changed a lot. and little by little was becoming more geometric, but I really don't feel, I don't use geometric in his right name because my geometry is more sensitive.
Simple. In a way.
It's not based in mathematics.
Mhm.
So,
Intuitive geometry.
yeah. So I don't know if I answered the question.
That that was a perfect answer to the question because, and then we're going to ask if you have any questions for us. That was a very good explanation of the genesis and then the development of what becomes your mature art. So everything after the two pictures that are on the in the center gallery, which were the beginnings of this coalescing of shapes into more hard-edged shapes, and then finally the very specific let's call it quasi-geometric forms that develop only because you could use acrylic. It dries quickly, and it also gives you that flexibility as you mentioned earlier. But you also are a printmaker. You also do smaller works in watercolor.
Yeah.
And so you are quite varied in the processes that you use in your long career.
The symmetry appears without really looking for that, you know.
So symmetry is
So the painting over there has the symmetry there. It was on the 80s, was the symmetry, no? In the 80s, it started the symmetry. And it start with the stripes, the smaller stripes. And then I love it and keep working with symmetry until now. I don't know what I'm going to change it, but keep there is it's like gives you more I don't know how to say it.
en español como
Como is como peaceful.
Yeah, there's like such I think such a harmony and
Harmony.
and it's in a sort of
Yeah.
transcendent sensibility that's achieved through symmetry. But sometimes I think that the symmetry slips a little bit too because you're saying it's intuitive geometry. And for that reason, I think that it also creates that vibration that Edward was speaking about earlier.
So yeah, and looking for order. Yeah, symmetry gives me order. Um, uh,
So do you understand? Symmetry creates the order of the painting, and Fanny arrived at her signature type of symmetry in the 80s, and from that she continued to investigate the possibilities of symmetry, and has done so ever since, and may continue to do so in the future. But maybe she'll go back to figuration and create completely different things. We don't know. Any other questions or yeah?
Yeah, funny. Now you are at top of your career. What is next? Ahora estás en el tope de tu carrera.
no, why?
Claro que sí. ¿Qué es lo próximo?
I'm working. I'm still working until I die. There people ask me, perdón, when are you going to retire? Artists don't retire. I never going to retire. If maybe when I cannot do physical work, you know. So I don't feel that I at top of my career. I feel that thanks for all these people, marvelous people that have helped me in all my career from the 60s to now. And this exhibition has been great for me, very pleasant, and I'm so grateful that I cannot, really cannot talk too much about that. And it gives me that the recognition is been great. I appreciate that, really appreciate it. I'm so happy that in a way or another, I communicate with people through my works. So for me, it's wonderful that people can look at the paintings and feel something. I don't know what, without asking what is that, what is, you know? So for me, it's like a fulfillment or the painting that you could reach a communication with the spectator. So it's great. So I'm sorry, but te paré, no sé qué me ibas a preguntar. What are you going to ask? I'm sorry.
No, no panic, ya me respondiste.
¿Sí?
Yeah, you answered my question.
Okay. So the essence of the question and the answer was that what you have reached the pinnacle of your career. What are you doing next? And Fanny said, I have no idea, but I'm not stopping. I get up, I work every day, and she does that. And that's that's actually a perfect summation. And maybe one other question that we might have.
I want to ask a question about moving to the United States or living in New York City. Has any way hurt your work? If it does, in which way?
Yeah, I said my whole life in my country, in Colombia, and then in Mexico, where I lived for many years. And there I did my first exhibition in Mexico, and then we went to London, and go back to Mexico. We traveled a lot to Europe when we were in London, because it was easy to travel as a student. So all these things that I saw there, the culture that I had to live with them, all those things influenced me. I don't know how, but all these things that I have seen, the people that are my friends, the people that I have seen in the real art, or in the museums, in the musicians, everything, including you now, they are going to influence me in a way. I don't know how, but they're so. My painting also, I think, develops because all those places where I live and the people that I treat. And I think it will be, no? As far as I'm healthy, I will continue to paint, and I will receive a lot of influence that maybe I'm not aware of that. But they are there.
Sí, pregunta sobre las formas orgánicas que antes pintaba y luego con que pude hacer en Nueva York, con tantas estructuras y arquitecturas, y eso también habrá influido en tu obra.
Pero ¿cuál es la pregunta?
Sí, esa era la pregunta. Si es así.
La que ella preguntó.
Sí, sí.
Okay.
Like, I think the answer
Pero
to that.
de arquitectura, las bandas empezaron en Monterrey,
Yes.
México.
Actually, to specifically answer your question, with which we will wrap up our evening, the geometry and the bands began long before Fanny came to New York. when she was living in Mexico, she began to do that. And but it was probably strengthened certainly by the experience of living in a vertical city like New York. But I think we might terminamos con lo que acaba de decir, que cada mañana te levantas, every morning you get up and you work and you mix your own colors and you do your own studies, and you do them again and you do them again, and you discard some and you use some, and you are constantly reinventing. There's nothing that you do that is a copy of what you had done the day before. Is that true?
Yes.
That is a good summation of your constant originality?
I don't know. I was influenced because I look at all the art, all the artists, figurative or abstract, whatever. But I try to follow my own language. You know, and not to copy myself also.
Yeah.
So,
Good. Following your own language, following your own vision, and never copying yourself. That is, I think, a perfect summation of what you've done for almost 60 years.